Well, hello everybody, and welcome to session number 1 of the Business School Leaders Forum, brought to you by GoToWebinar and LogMeIn. I'm David Woodshale, Director of Marketing and Communications at AMBA and BGA. And for this session, I'm delighted to be joined by Paolo Tatiki, Professorial Teaching Fellow in Management and Sustainability and Executive Director of Global Student Experience at Imperial College London. Paolo will be presenting on online and blended learning and offering insight for the strategic redesign of MBA programs. In a moment, I'll pass over to Paolo, but just before I do that, I just want to tell you all that this session will have a Q&A discussion at the end. So if you've got any questions at all for the speaker, please type this in the little box in your control panel, and I'm going to try and get through as many of them as I can towards the end of the session. But if we do run out of time, don't worry, because these will be passed on to Paolo, who's very kindly agreed to get in touch with you and answer your questions directly. I'll be in the line throughout the webinar, so if you have any queries, just pop them in the Q&A box and I'll come straight back to you. I think I've spoken for long enough, so without further ado, I'll now pass you over to Paolo.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the gentle introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to lead on this first seminar of this event on a topic that is indeed very interesting to all of us, and it's the topic of online and blended learning and how we can redesign, MBA programs in the short term and medium and long term, taking into account the opportunities of that online education can give us. I have the presentation. I'm going to speak for the next 30-35 minutes, and then I'm going to be very happy to take questions, and we can make this webinar a bit more interactive. A bit of information about me and my experience in the context of online education and MBAs. I became an MBA director very young. Probably, I think I was one of the, if not the youngest MBA director in the world of a Triple Crown university at the age of 30. And that was at the time the MBA program offered in Italy by Bradford the School of Management and the University of Perugia. At the same time, in 2010, I started working with online education, and that was in New York at the School of Engineering there, where I taught one of the very first electives online in a synchronous way. I remember that experience really as a fascinating experience. I was based in London already, teaching students in 2 different campuses of NYU in New York through online technology. Then in the UK, I led MBAs for 2 years at the University of East London, and there I launched a blended MBA. The online element in that case was predominantly asynchronous. And more recently at Imperial College Business School, I've been leading 2 of our MBA programs, the Weekend MBA, our part-time program, and the Global Online MBA, a program we launched in 2015. It's a big program, and recently got ranked number 2 in the world by QS, and received a number of awards. In occasion of this unfortunate and unprecedented time, I also got involved with an initiative that has been launched in Italy a number of weeks ago by the School of Management of Polytechnic of Milan, I was one of the 5 experts that basically delivered a very small but hopefully effective training for Italian professors to manage the kind of very quick imposed transition to online teaching during this period of crisis. And I've been working with AMBA and BGA for a while as an assessor, so I had the opportunity to visit a number of schools worldwide and to really see with my eyes the success of MBA programs around the world, and some of the challenges as well that programs and school face. As you know, online education is booming everywhere, and we have seen a growing number of MBA programs brought online in the recent years. And the market is a competitive one, and based on my experience today, when we look at the market of online MBAs, substantially there are 3 groups of programs, 3 groups of schools. There is a very small group of programs that really tried to establish a leadership position in the market, and the schools that launched these online MBAs really made significant investments to be at the cutting edge of technology, the cutting edge of pedagogies, and to offer premium experiences online. There is a growing number of what I could describe as high quality online MBA programs. This means they are becoming more sophisticated. They are offering a good student experience to their students, but they do lack some of the kind of innovative practices or best practices that the kind of top players have in place. And then in the market, there is still a relatively big number of old distance learning MBAs that have been repurposed and rebranded as online programs. But the reality is that the design is very old. The contents are not particularly innovative. Pedagogies are very traditional, and the technology is not really leveraged as it could be. And as a result, these programs offer a relatively low experiences for the students. So what I'm going to do today with you is to try to share some kind of best practices that are at the base of the design of online MBA programs and redesign of online MBA programs. That practices that I have seen not only at Imperial but in other top schools that have really tried to develop significantly their MBA programs in the online space. So this is the agenda for today. Really 3 topics. Most of the presentation is focused on strategic decisions that are at the base of the design of online programs, and therefore can be used also as a criteria for the redesign when that is needed. A couple of comments on what could be short-term needs. Many of us are facing the challenging situation to move hopefully one term, maybe more than that, online, with programs that were not designed to be delivered online. So, maybe a full-time program on campus that this September is starting online. So in this case, there are of course some challenging decisions that many of us are facing, and I'm going to share some tips and reflections on what could be good solutions for moving online activities for just one term. So what could be a short-term approach that doesn't disrupt the medium long-term approach we need to maintain to the delivery of our MBA programs. And then I'm going to end with some final considerations. And in half an hour from now, I'm keen to open it to the floor for questions. And as there are really many participants connected today, we are not going to be able to answer all questions, but as anticipated in the introduction, I'm going to reply to all of you by email, and we can of course follow up with one-to-one conference calls if necessary. I think this is really an unprecedented time and a moment where we need to be very collaborative. So I'm very happy to share my experience with all of you if it can be useful to manage to manage operations, to manage business continuity and student experience in this difficult time. So I'm going to start with a number of reflections on the design. I think one major decision that schools face when they look at the design of an online program, and this is true for any kind of program, not just MBAs, of course, is the balance between online synchronous, online asynchronous, and the possibility of integrating a blended element in the experience. So just to give you an idea of the program we run at Imperial College Business School, our Global Online MBA is a blended program. Student is a 2-year program, part-time. Students come on campus at least twice. They come for a week at the beginning of the program, and they come for 9 days at the end of the program in the second year, and then they study most of the time online. And in our case, the program is predominantly asynchronous, but students have live interactions with professors and tutors almost every week. Now, of course, synchronous and asynchronous are very different forms of teaching and learning. And of course, many schools, try to combine the two to leverage the advantages of these different forms of online delivery. And it is very important to be very clear and very honest about the advantages and disadvantages of these two forms of learning. Asynchronous calls for a huge amount of design. We need to prepare the materials. We need to design the learning experience very carefully. We need, very often to produce nice, sophisticated materials. It's not only about, videos and readings. There is more than that. There are fantastic tools that can be used today for online learning, and should be leveraged in the context of an asynchronous module or the asynchronous component of a module. Designing these type of asynchronous materials can be cheap if you use, for example, open source tools, or you have, for example, faculty producing videos and materials by themselves, but can also be extremely expensive if you wanted to produce very high quality videos with animations, or if you want, for example, to run simulations online and so on. So the cost of that solution vary. Of course, when you design materials for an asynchronous delivery, you may be able to repurpose some of these materials in other classes or in other programs. So there is a kind of an advantage in terms of reuse of existing materials. But at the same time, of course, when you have an asynchronous form of delivery, you may miss interaction, even if forums, chats online, and different tools can be used for the purpose of creating interaction with students. The reality is that students love interaction with faculty. They love interaction with each other. They love interaction with tutors, and they love when that happens in a live way. And that's why many schools do have a synchronous element in their modules, in their programs, to really leverage and use the faculty time, tutors time at best for the purpose of creating a very strong student experience and a good learning experience. Synchronous, first of all, still calls for a lot of preparation. It's not, it's not easy for faculty to teach online. Teaching online in a synchronous way is very different from teaching on campus. You need to be familiar you need to be familiar with the pedagogies for online teaching. You need to be able to use time in the right way, and you need to be able to develop a presence online, and you need to be familiar with engagement strategies online. So this is basically to say that when you have a synchronous component in your online MBA or blended MBA, you really need to invest on faculty, and you really need to train your professors for that type of delivery. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to offer the premium experience that you can offer with the online teaching form of delivery as you could. So the two things, asynchronous and synchronous, are often combined by schools, and the very big decision is the balance. Is what proportion of one method or the other one you have in your program. If you wanted to offer a very high touch program, you may want to go in the direction of a more synchronous program. If you wanted to offer a lot of flexibility to your students, you may want to reduce the number of live sessions, and therefore you go more in the direction of an asynchronous program. How do you decide on the right balance? If it's 50-50, if it's 70% asynchronous and 30% synchronous, or the other way around? Well, based on my experience, there are a couple of criteria that you can use to take this type of decision in a very strategic way. The first one, you need to understand what is your market. Some schools use online technology and launch online MBA programs because they want to go global. This means they target students mainly in other countries. And when that happens, the issue of managing students in different time zones becomes a major issue. And when you are in that type of situation, you cannot push too much synchronous learning. So most likely you're gonna end up with a program predominantly asynchronous. If you're using online delivery to really address the needs of the local market, and that could be, for example, the case of maybe executives in your region, and you don't have the issue of different time zones, you may kind of want to consider a program with a higher synchronous component. Something also to keep in mind is the size of the program, and this is the size of the program, and your growth plans are going to affect significantly this type of decision. If you are designing a program for 30 students, you can probably push synchronous learning quite significantly, because you can manage a class of 30 relatively well in an online environment. But if you are planning a program for 300 students, at that point, again, you may want to consider to go in the direction of an async or asynchronous or predominantly synchronous program, because otherwise it's going to be very problematic to manage live sessions with larger classes, or to, for example, divide the class into smaller classrooms, and therefore basically run the same live sessions multiple times in order to teach smaller groups of students. So something to keep in mind is the size and the market. These two things can really help you in reflecting on the type of format you may want to develop for your MBA online. A blended component is a nice element. This means the idea at a certain point to have students on campus, and it is very important for business school to develop, to cultivate relations with their students, because one day they become alumni, and very often it is easier if you interact with students face to face than online. But again, you need to be careful to not force students to come on campus too many times, especially if you have an international cohort of students. In some countries, the number of days they can take for holidays is a very small number. You are looking at countries, for example, like the US or Japan, where they have 14, 15, 16 days in a year. And this means that you cannot force or expect the students to take 70% of their annual leave to come on campus, because there is a mandatory face-to-face component of their program. So my suggestion is to plan for some experiences on campus and offer many additional experiences in a flexible way. This means it's not mandatory to come on campus, but you give the option to visit the campus and study on campus as the students may really like and appreciate that. A second topic I wanted to discuss with you is the one of faculty and the type of governance mechanisms you need to establish when you design an online MBA program or kind of redesign one. First, I think it is very, very important that you try to use the same MBA faculty you already use. I have seen schools that have kind of radically changed the MBA faculty for online delivery with the objective of kind of leveraging maybe some young faculty who were, tech enthusiasts and very keen to teach online, or happy to teach online, or more happy to teach online compared to the maybe older faculty. Now, I think that is a big mistake. An MBA program is very often a flagship program in a business school, and this means that you really need to have the best faculty out there. An MBA program is a part of your brand, and an online MBA is going to be an important program building your brand and reputation. So make sure that you try to use the same faculty and your big names, your famous professors should be there. And this means that you really need to have strategies and incentives to engage this faculty with online delivery. Of course, in the moment you have an online provision, there are a number of IP related problems that you need to carefully manage, and a very common problem is the one of recognizing online teaching in respect of traditional teaching hours. And again, based on my experience, different schools approach this very differently. And there isn't really a best practice there yet for this type of problem. Some schools try to keep online teaching as part of the traditional load. Other schools they decided to move online teaching off load. And at times there are schools offering a mix of that, and that is the case, for example, at Imperial College Business School. At the moment, some faculty for some faculty is part of their load, for some faculty is offload. When we started, by the way, was offload for everybody. This is is a complex topic, because when you have modules that are taught partially online in a synchronous way and partially online in asynchronous way, you need to basically come up with frameworks to basically be able to say, okay, this module is made of 6 hours of live teaching, but then there is work done by the faculty for the asynchronous study. So this module is equivalent to 20 hours on campus. This is an important conversation you need to have. Many schools in this crisis faced many challenges because they were not ready to face this situation of the faculty suddenly teaching online. Of course, in the case the teaching is offload, you need to plan and agree fees for teaching. And for example, at Imperial, we do have three different fees that we offer to faculty teaching online. There is a first fee for the design of the module. There is a second fee for the delivery of the module, and there is also a third fee that we offer every year to faculty to improve the materials, because you know, the business environment keeps changing very fast. So your online materials become very old very quickly. So you need to have plans for continuously invest on your online resources, and this means you need to budget, for example, for redesigning 20% of your modules every year, and that of course comes with a cost, and you know, comes in the form of work that faculty is called to do. You also kind of, you know, need to plan carefully for the use of teaching assistants. In many MBA programs, MBA faculty use the teaching assistants to support the learning experience. If you run a large online program, you need to plan carefully, you know, this asset. This means how many teaching assistants you're going to need, what type of training they need to have. Are we going to use PhD students or postdocs, or are we going to hire, for example, teaching fellows to support the delivery of a module? So that is again something you need to plan carefully. Especially if you are expecting an aggressive growth of your program in the market. Because kind of, you know, online teaching and online programs are new to everybody. As I said, there are some kind of, you know, emerging best practices. There are practices that you can study in top schools, but I think there is a great level of innovation here. There is, you know, really the opportunity to experiment, and that's why I believe, you know, it's very important that the role of senior management teams, because they need to be very flexible. They need to kind of, you know, really facilitate the introduction of new governance mechanisms in school, and they need kind of to manage these complex discussions with faculty. So when it comes to online delivery, I believe there is a very important role played by deans and associate deans, and of course MBA directors. Third topic I wanted to touch is the one of student engagement. When the students study online, there is a very significant risk that they feel alone and they feel disconnected from your business school community. So my suggestion for you, and this is very important if you're planning to move online your activities in September, or you know, are already moved activities online for the very first time, is to create opportunities of interaction with your students. So for example, with the Global Online MBA, every month I was offering to students a session called Ask Me Anything. This means I was making myself available to them for any kind of questions, you know, business related, school related, program related. But it was you know, a moment where they had the opportunity to interact live with a senior member of the faculty, with a senior member of the management team, and this is something that students really, you know, appreciated. I think, you know, you can also try to push students, to invite the students to organize their own activities online. Again, the goal is to create engagement, and there are many student-led initiatives that you can support, facilitate, that could really improve the experience of students online. And you really wanted to minimize the natural divide that there is between on-campus students and online students. You know, for that purpose, for example, if you try to stream some events that maybe your full-time MBA students attend on campus to the online students, that is something that the online community is going to appreciate a lot. And it is also very important that program teams are regularly in touch with students online, because otherwise, you know, when they are on campus, you kind of, you know, you bump to them, you kind of, you know, meet them also occasionally. But when they are online, the students can disappear very easily. So my suggestion is, you know, plan for your administrators, for your program team to call your students every month at least to say, how are you? How is this experience? Everything is good with your study. Have you got any suggestions or feedback to us? If you kind of know, if you call them, students are going to appreciate that, you know, you seek an interaction with them, you seek feedback from them. Teaching online is a unique experience, but also studying online is a unique experience. And the topic of digital citizenship is extremely important. This means you need to set the expectations. Faculty and program teams need to explain very well and very carefully how students are going to study online. They need to be comfortable with using, you know, the platforms that you use for online teaching. They need to know that, you know, they are expected to be in a professional environment and all of that. So make sure that the kind of, you know, online study experience is not new to them, but they kind of, you know, understand what to expect. The topic of assessment is a complex one. On one side, you know, in an online program, you want to keep the traditional mix of individual and group coursework. Don't, you know, exaggerate with group coursework if you have students in different time zones. Otherwise, it gets tricky. And then, you know, there is the issue of exams. Some schools started doing exams online for the first time during the crisis. Some universities were already experienced with online exams, while other universities offering online programs were asking students to take exams on campus. So again, there are different formats. The technology is improving for online exams. Proctoring softwares are improving. They are becoming cheaper as well. So I think, you know, this is a good opportunity, it's a good time to really run experiments and pilot the use of these type of softwares. And of course, you know, make sure that students receive marks and feedback on time, because that is always, you know, very important in any program. In many MBA programs, we do have international experiences. Some of these experiences can be brought online. So my suggestion is, if you are suddenly redesigning your MBA because of an online delivery next academic year, don't you know, necessarily plan for canceling this type of experience. I believe, you know, there are ways to deliver you know, student exchange online, or a study tour online that, you know, all of us have probably experimented in the past weeks, that can still offer a good experience and a good learning experience. So you can maintain this international element of your MBA online. The technology is a big decision. I don't believe we have time, you know, today to kind of, you know, really discuss this in depth, but I know you have other sessions on this topic of the technology. But this is to say that there are two things that really kind of, you know, qualify and drive the experience of students online. On one side, there is the technology, the type of experience that they have with technology. And the second one is the type of pedagogies that professors use online to facilitate their learning. So if you are an online leader, it means that you are a leader on technology and you are a leader when it comes to pedagogies. And then, of course, you need to redesign all the classic MBA services for an online delivery. And again, this means very often to train your staff to be efficient, to be effective in the delivery of these type of services purely online. So going to an end, some tips if you are in the very challenging situation of moving, for example, one term online in September. If that is the situation, my suggestion is that first, you may want to have a mix of asynchronous and synchronous learning. Don't push too much the asynchronous component, because there is no time to design good asynchronous materials from now and September. You may want to have modules predominantly synchronous and move online in asynchronous format, as much as you can, taking into account that availability of the faculty and time is limited from now to September. When it comes to the design of asynchronous materials for online delivery, ask your faculty to be strategic. Build now things that you are going to reuse in the future. Don't build now things that you are not going to use in the future. That would be a mistake. And I believe, take radical decisions. Some schools, for example, already announced that they are not going to have a student exchange program next year. Some schools announced that they are not going to offer international experiences next year. These are, tough decisions to take, but I think, we need to keep communication with students as much as clear as possible. Students will understand that we are in an unprecedented time if we are clear, if they understand that we are doing our best and taking strategic decisions. In the case of MBA programs, if you believe that, for example, your first term is going to be online, but the other terms are going to be face-to-face, you may want to explore the opportunity to rethink the order of modules. That could maybe help to offer a good student experience. And I believe it's very important that you plan the touch points online with your students. So if you are going to have a term online, you should design the student experience during those weeks, and maybe offer something new, something that wasn't a part of the program before. So they they really see an effort of the school to offer a good experience. And because this is an unprecedented phase, really try to design solutions with your students. Try to create economies of scale by working with partner institutions. I believe there are a lot of opportunities, there. So to close this presentation, I think the pure online MBA market is a go big, go home game. This means don't believe that because you are going to move some activities online in the next months, this means that there is an opportunity for you to become an online MBA provider or an online MBA leader in your region, because it's a tough market. It calls for major investments, it calls for a lot of knowledge of technology, it calls for a lot of commitment, and is a very different market from the one of face-to-face programs. But keeping this in mind, I believe the future is blended. This means more and more traditional MBA programs are going to have online components. So this is, a fantastic opportunity to start developing this expertise and to experiment. And again, my suggestion is, to try to work with partner schools. I believe the future is going to be more collaborative. And especially now, we need to share experiences to know what works better and what can lead to a positive student experience. And in this unprecedented time, I believe that the ability to learn fast could really lead your schools to develop a competitive advantage in industry. And I always give the example of Nokia in the mobile phone market. This is the cover of Forbes in 2007, celebrating Nokia hitting 1 billion customers, and you know that the market share of Nokia today is very, very small. Why? Because markets can change dramatically quickly, and online education is a disruptor of traditional education. Is not a replacement, but it's gonna change the drivers of competition. So it's very important that schools engage with online education to be ready to compete. So this is what I had for you. I hope these reflections were interesting to your schools, and at this point I would be very happy to take a few questions, and then I'm going to answer by email the questions we're not able to answer in the next 10 minutes. So thank you very much for your attention, for listening, and my congratulations for the response all of us we have been able to put in place in the past weeks that were really crazy. And I believe schools worldwide, the professors have really done their best to maintain a positive student experience. So well done on that.
Well, Paolo, thank you so much for such an insightful and also really practical presentation. We've got a few questions have come through, so I'm just going to crack on with those. Firstly, somebody has outlined that it could be a misnomer to assume that older faculty are not au fait or comfortable with online delivery, and younger students are more comfortable with tech. So with that in mind, what would your advice to business schools be in terms of supporting students and faculty to make the move to online?
That's a very good good question, and I believe it's absolutely true. Not necessarily students are ready to study online, and not necessarily young professors may be more ready to teach online than older professors. I believe the answer is a training and setting the right expectations. And I believe what is important to acknowledge is that the profession of being a teacher today is the profession of being a teacher in general is a continuously evolving profession. So what were the tools and knowledge, skills requested to a professor 20 years ago are different now, and are going to be different in 20 years from now. So I believe online teaching should be part of the toolbox and in the skill set of any professor today in a top school, in a top university. So I believe we need to explain this to colleagues. We need to show that online teaching is not particularly difficult. It's actually a very interesting form of teaching, can be very rewarding for faculty, and is not about replacing the traditional teaching. So I believe we need a lot of communication and trainings to overcome the cultural barriers associated to online teaching and online studying, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. So somebody else is asking if you might be able to share your thoughts on teaching with cases online. Effectively, does this differ from on-campus classroom and better as a synchronous or asynchronous exercise?
Yeah, very good question. I do. I mean, I teach strategy and sustainability courses online, and most of my classes are case-based. So I largely use cases online. I believe it works better if you teach cases in live sessions. So typically what I do, for example, is to ask students to prepare the case in advance, and we use the live session for the traditional case discussion. Online case discussions can work very well because you can, for example, use virtual whiteboards to take notes. I use, for example, very basic Google documents that I share on my screen, and I take notes there. You can kind of create different rules of interaction. You can interact with the students through the chat, or you can ask students to raise their virtual hand and speak. Certain platforms like Zoom give you the opportunity to create virtual breakout rooms. So you can have small discussions and then kind of collegial discussions as well. So for me, the case method, which is a very common pedagogy in business schools, is something you can bring online extremely easily, and we don't compromise at all the experience of students. I'm a big fan of cases. I use them on campus and I use them online. If you don't have huge classes, you can also try to monitor class participation online. So that becomes also an, kind of, a stimulus to the engagement of students.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question involves engagement and really sort of measuring engagement during synchronous sessions. Sometimes students come online, but they're not focused on what's actually happening within the teaching session. So have you got any suggestions on how to sort of monitor that, measure that, and then action changes if necessary?
I mean, of course, there are different pedagogies and strategies that can be used online to kind of, create engagement. I think a very classic rule is to try to break the format of the live session every 15 minutes. So maybe for 15 minutes you have the professor lecturing, then in the following 15 minutes you have maybe a discussion with students, then there is a video for another 15 minutes, then there is a pool, and you stimulate another discussion. So by breaking by breaking the live session and by leveraging both different technologies, different online tools, and different pedagogies, first you create engagement and attention goes up. Then you can, for example, try, as I said, to force engagement by introducing active class participation in the live sessions. For example, you can ask the students to comment on the chat or to speak, and you basically keep record of that. That's another way to do it. It works very well if you have small classes. Another kind of, I think a very important thing is to ask and force students to keep their webcams open. So very often I see professors teaching online and the students are connected, but you can't see them. If you can't see them, you don't know what they are doing. You don't know if they are listening or doing something else. You know, because you don't see their webcams, you don't receive kind of feedback from their faces. That is, you know, very important to get some kind of, you know, live immediate feedback when you're teaching. So one suggestion is to try to force the students to keep webcams open. It's just a rule that you set at the very beginning, and then, you know, you need to try to stimulate a lot of you know, interaction as much as you can. I think, you know, warm calling works well for that purpose. If it's necessary, at times you go with cold calling as well online to get the attention of students. But again, you know, there are a number of strategies that can be used and pedagogies to push engagement.
Lovely, thank you very much. I think we've got time for one last quick question, which might not actually be a quick answer. Somebody's asked, what if students don't consider online as the typical MBA experience that they were looking for? And what advice would you have for them on how to compensate for perhaps the online experiences they would have in a classroom or blended program? So perhaps the networking, a collaboration?
So, so of course, if kind of, you know, a student was planning to study a face-to-face program, and suddenly in September the offering is online, that could be perceived as a very different experience, hopefully not as a big product. So first of all, I believe you need to provide a lot of reassurance that you are, you know, experienced with online education, that faculty is trained with this form of delivery, and that you can basically offer the same standards, the same quality online as you would have done on campus. So I think there is an effort of communication, and if some schools kind of, you know, are afraid to kind of lose the students because of this specific problem, my suggestion is offer as many taster sessions as you can in the next weeks to show prospective students that you know, online teaching can be, you know, can be fantastic and can be, you know, a very good experience to them. Then I believe, you know, you can also try to plan for a number of face-to-face on-campus activities later on, maybe in the second part of the program or in the second year of the program. So you kind of know, you basically put on the table something new, something that wasn't part of the original offering, and that again should you know, help to kind of stimulate the engagement of students and to hopefully push the conversion of students. I believe, you know, a lot of students or prospective students simply don't understand what online education is. They don't know what to expect. So you do need to make an effort in the next weeks to tell this prospect you know, what you are going to offer, why is not compromising the quality, and I believe that is going to support conversion significantly.
Well, thank you very much, Paolo. I think that's all we have time for, but thank you once again for taking the time and for such an excellent session. It's been an amazing start to our forum, so thank you again for that. We've got plenty more. We've got plenty more sessions to come over the next couple of weeks. So, and with that in mind, the next session is developing and measuring workplace soft skills, the challenge for business programs today. And that's going to be hosted by Peregrine Global Services at 3:30 p.m. BST. If you've already signed up for the session, you will have or will be about to receive an email from us with a link to join. But if not, I've included the registration link in the chat box for you all. Just copy and paste that into your browser and you'll be able to register for the session. Just before we go, after the first week of the Business School Leaders Forum, you'll receive an email with access to view all the recordings, including this one. So don't worry if you missed anything, you want to refresh your memories. And please remember that we still have loads more sessions to come, and you can see all the remaining sessions and register via our website. So Paolo, thank you once again for taking the time to speak to us all today. And we look forward to seeing everybody in another session very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.